Welcome to the American Dream in the Eyes of Immigrants podcast. I am your host, Heidy De La Cruz, and I am on the mission to change the narrative of immigration, one immigrant story at a time. Welcome back to another episode. And I am so excited to share with you that this podcast officially now has 3 sponsors. That's right. I was able to get another one. The sponsor is actually sponsoring the event coming up this Thursday, the 24th. So if you haven't gotten your ticket, get your ticket, link in bio. Come hang out with me, come hang out with past guests, come hang out with other business owners, come hang out with other immigrants, and let's celebrate all the successes of the podcast. The podcast is officially 3 years old. So April 19th was the 3rd anniversary of this podcast. Is when I published my first episode. And that's what this whole celebration is all about. This networking event on Thursday, it's to celebrate all the good things of this podcast. And yeah, so the sponsor, right? Sponsoring the event, sponsoring the podcast for the next year. So the sponsor is Capital Buick GMC, which is actually a dealership in Atlanta, Georgia. But guess what? You can go to their website. The link is in the show notes in the show description. And you can actually see the cars that are available. They do ship anywhere to the US. So you'll be able to buy a car online and they will ship it to you. Isn't that great? So thank you so much for Capital Buick GMC for sponsoring this podcast for the next year. For those who are going to the event, I'm so excited. I can't wait to see you on Thursday. If you haven't bought your ticket, go ahead and buy it. I can't wait to see you there. And thank you so much for being here again and enjoy the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the American Dream in the Eyes of Immigrants podcast. As you know, I am your host, Heidy De La Cruz, and today I have a very special guest. I have Lazou with me, and she is going to be talking to us about growing up in Mauritius, but then also spending some time in Canada, and then officially coming to the US. So thank you again so much for being here with us and being willing to share your story. And I always like to get started just by you introducing yourself, who you are, what you do, and then get right into growing up in your home country.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm honored to be here. My name is Lazou. I grew up in Mauritius, which is a tiny island east of Madagascar in the Indian Ocean. It is the only place the dodo bird ever lived, and it's also where you can find the underwater waterfall that everybody's seen on the internet. It's a beautiful tiny island, very different from growing up in the United States, based on what I've heard.
Yeah, like I told you before we started recording, like I had to Google this, guys. Like I had no idea this country existed. And once we got connected, I Googled and I was like, this is a beautiful country. And then I also learned that it's very diverse. So correct me if I'm wrong. I read that there was, in Indian culture and then Chinese and then obviously African. Was that accurate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Mauritius was first colonized by the Dutch, then the French, then the British. They each brought slaves, indentured laborers. My ancestors came when there was turmoil in China and they fled.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so it is relatively diverse. The thing is, I think in the US you have a lot more different ethnic groups than we do in Mauritius. Mauritius is a small country, 1.2
Yeah.
million people. But I think there is more of a pluralism vibe there where, here in the US, it's a secular country, but it's really kind of a Christian country, right? Whereas in Mauritius, there's the majority of the political people are Hindu, but there's a huge portion of the country, like most of the Black community and most of the Chinese community is also Christian. There's also a big Muslim population. So all those different religions coexist, and there isn't necessarily one that is considered the main one.
Okay.
So I feel like we grew up learning more about each other's religions, traditions. We had one public holiday for each religion. that
Oh, that's nice.
was on the island. So it's nice that there weren't that many of us, we could each have a
Yeah.
holiday. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
And so we ended up learning about those holidays. What does that mean? What are you celebrating? The Chinese people were both Buddhist and Catholic. Um, so we got Chinese New Year as our holiday, which was
Mm.
great. So I grew up, I didn't realize it at the time, but I think coming to the US, I realized that I have always been a minority throughout my entire life, but the experience of being a minority in Mauritius is very different from the experience of being a minority in the US.
Mm.
In Mauritius, I was a minority as a light-skinned person. Most everyone around me was dark-skinned because most of the people are of South Asian or African descent. Chinese people are 2% of the population, and white people are less than 1%. So there's barely any white people other than tourists. Um, the local white people is like very, very small group. So growing up, I never felt like I was a foreigner in Mauritius because Chinese Mauritians are a thing. Nobody questions that. I think coming to the US and then especially after COVID was when I saw that difference. Like, oh, I will never be seen as a regular American.
Mm.
Like they always see the Asian first and they're like, oh yeah, maybe you're American too, but you're Asian.
But you're Asian.
Whereas in
Yep.
Mauritius, it's like it's never questioned. You speak the language and they're like, oh yeah, you're Mauritian.
Hmm.
Nobody ever questions that. So that was a very striking difference for me where um, you can be a minority in a country, but the experience is very different based on where you are.
Mm.
Like, I never felt unsafe for being Chinese in Mauritius. I definitely felt unsafe during COVID, like the first couple years where there were a lot of anti-Asian stuff going
Yeah.
on. That was very bizarre, to
Oh
be
my
honest.
goodness. Very sad.
Um, yeah.
Mm.
But yeah, and then I still don't quite realize that the US is a white country because I just grew up with so much diversity around me.
Yeah.
And then I went
Yeah.
to college in Canada, in Toronto,
Very
most,
diverse city.
very diverse. A lot of the
Hmm.
student population was coming from elsewhere, a lot of international students. So I felt in my element there. And then I moved
Nice.
to the Bay Area in California. That was also relatively diverse. A bit more white than I was used to, but still relatively diverse.
Yeah.
Um, and then I moved down to LA. I think it is diverse, but it's also segregated. There's
Okay.
like there's the Latino area, there's the Black area, there's the
Hmm.
Asian area. I think it's a lot more spread out because it's a lot more spread out. There's all these pockets that looks really weird. Um, yeah, it's very different.
Yeah. It's like a, very different experience in each place that you've been. And it's crazy as the more people that I talk to, and depending on again where they landed in the US, also just depends on obviously their experience. Cause I've had guests who's like they grew up with like mostly just white people, right? And then them being like, oh, I didn't see a lot of people that looked like me. Or the opposite, I've heard. Like they had a bunch of diverse and people from all over where they grew up. And then once they like got to like college or something, is like, wow, there's actually places in the US where there's only white people and like we're the minorities. So it's just crazy to hear
Yeah,
like all these different experiences from, different people. So let's
yeah. I
talk
mean,
about going to Canada. So you
mhm.
went to college. So that was the main reason why you had decided to go to Canada.
Yeah, so I was actually born in Canada, and then my parents moved back to Mauritius. They didn't want to
Oh.
stay in Canada, so I moved back to Mauritius when I was 2. So I don't remember,
Mhm.
before moving back.
Okay.
So because I was Canadian, I would pay the local tuition fee as opposed to the international tuition fee. So it was a no-brainer, right? Um, yeah, so I went to Canada. I had relatives there, so it wasn't completely like just going to a foreign country by myself.
Oh, okay, okay.
So that was nice. I had cousins nearby, so it wasn't as much of a culture shock for me. But it was bizarre. Growing up, the only time I saw white people was when I would go to a hotel
Mm,
or when I would turn on the TV because you watch TV, it's all like from France, England, US. But I didn't see white people in my daily life.
mm.
And I remember moving to Canada, it was like, oh, it's so weird. Like things look like what they looked like on TV.
On TV.
So bizarre. There's so many things that are like, oh, this is so weird.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So born in Canada. And it's funny that you said that since you were Canadian, you didn't have to the college tuition that you didn't have to pay the international because here you have to be a resident of whatever state, right? You have to be a resident of the state for at least a year to be able to do the
Mhm.
local tuition, or else you have to pay either the out of state tuition and there's different fee for international students. So that's
Oh, wow.
crazy.
So
Yeah.
even if let's say you're in California and you want to go to school in Florida, you have to stay there a year before you get the local
Yep,
fee?
yep. So yep, exactly like that. So you're in
Oh.
California, you want to come to college in Florida, to it would be out of state tuition that you would pay unless you wait 1 year, and then that would mean you will be a resident of Florida, and then you can pay the in-state tuition. So that actually
Oh,
happened
wow.
to me. I was I wasn't born in Michigan, but I was raised in Michigan, and I did one year in Michigan, and then I transferred down here to Florida, and I didn't wait, the whole year. So I had to pay the out of state tuition, which was, a lot more. So, yep.
Wow. So then this next year, do you then get local
hmm Then after a
tuition?
year, you'll get the local to the
Mm,
in state tuition. Yep.
interesting.
Yeah. So it's actually interesting that, like, because you were Canadian, you could still didn't have to pay the international, because
Yeah.
the complete opposite here. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay. So how was what did you study in college in California?
In Canada, you mean?
Sorry. Yes, the
Yeah.
C's, the C's, that's yeah.
The C's, I know.
Yeah,
It's
I'm so
it's funny
sorry.
because everything is .ca in Canada, and then when I came here, it's like CA. You mean Canada or
Yeah,
California?
I legit was thinking in my mind Canada, but I said California. Okay, sorry. Yeah. So what did
Um,
you study in college in Canada?
I was in computer science. I got a computer science degree. Since I was a kid, I was always both a nerd and an artist. The
Okay.
one thing I was terrible at is sports. I was always terrible at sports. But I I was very creative as a kid, and I also did really well in school. I was kind of a nerd, so computer science it seemed to make sense. I didn't feel like going for a music degree would be a
Mm,
worthwhile investment for my parents. And so I didn't even
mm,
ask. I was like, I like programming, I find it fun. So I might as well do that. I know I will definitely get a job if I do that.
yeah.
So I did, and I think it was a good call. I right out of the college, I got work at a startup doing some really cool work, and then that startup got acquired by one of the big Silicon Valley companies,
Okay.
and I found myself with a job offer on my lap to move to California, and that was kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah. So if it wasn't for that job offer, do you think that you would have moved to the US?
Never,
Oh, never. Okay, hold on. Why not? Like, it just never crossed your mind?
never occurred to me because
Wow, okay.
I I was born in Canada. I already had citizenship there. Free
Yeah.
healthcare is awesome.
Mm.
I heard horrible things about the healthcare system here
Yep. Valid.
and the gun problem.
Valid.
Um, so yeah, there wasn't a lot that was very appealing. I mean, I knew, Hollywood, the music industry, there's a lot more going on in the US than in Canada. But in Canada, there's a lot more support systems, there's a lot more grants, there's a lot more government programs.
Mm.
So I didn't feel like I needed to come here to achieve the dream, whatever that means.
Wow.
And
Okay.
when I got the offer, it was an offer I couldn't refuse.
Mm,
And it was it was the first time that I had to consider moving to the US. Like that has never even occurred to me.
yeah.
Because also I didn't know anybody in the US. You know, I had family in Canada. I had my most of my family is still in Mauritius. What would I come
To
here
the US
for? You know,
for.
I was just
Yeah.
by myself. I didn't really have a reason to until I got the job offer. And then I was like, this sounds really cool. I want to do it. So I'm going to do it and then we'll see what happens. Um, and I'm still here.
And you're saying, okay, so that's awesome. And there's a lot going through my mind right now because you didn't consider moving to the US. Like that wasn't in your plans. That wasn't anything you had ever thought about. And just a job opportunity came up. And that's what really brought you here. And so, yeah, let's talk about then you moving to the US. Oh, any cultural shocks that happen here?
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, yeah, okay, let's get into that.
The culture shock started before I even got here. When
Oh,
I was filling out the forms to move to the US from Canada. As you know, Canadians are very polite and they are very polite on their forms too. And when you're an immigrant in Canada, they call you a new Canadian. They're very nice about it.
oh,
When you fill out the forms to move to the US, you find out that you're classified as a non resident alien.
yep,
I was like,
unfortunately.
that makes a girl feel welcome.
Mhm.
You know, I was
Yes.
like, okay, that is interesting there. Um, and then because I moved to the Bay Area where everything is expensive, I definitely got sticker shock for how much rent was, how much a
Mm,
taxi ride was. Um, but it was fine, like because I was at a big company that was very diverse and, you know, pretty liberal. I got along with people fine. My team was pretty diverse. And then 2016 happens.
mm.
And all of us at work were like, there's no way he's gonna win. I mean, come on, you know. Like, what?
Yes.
There's no way. There's just no way.
I legit thought it was a joke he was running. I was like, no,
So
he's
did
not
we.
running.
It's like,
Yeah.
what do you mean?
Yeah.
And then I remember that night, and we were all just stunned. We were all like, what the hell just happened?
Yeah.
And you know, right after that, he had the Muslim ban, and one of my colleagues was his fiance was in the process of moving from one of those countries that was getting banned, so
Oh no.
he was stressed about that.
Yeah.
I was on an H-1B visa, and then the lawyers were like, "Hey, we better like you know try to fast track your thing because we don't know how things are gonna go." And I was not too worried because I was born in Canada, so the worst they could do is deport me to Canada, you
Yeah.
know. But a lot
Free
of people,
healthcare.
it's like, yeah, worst case, I get free healthcare, big deal.
Yeah.
But you know, a lot of people weren't that lucky,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
were worried. A lot of my colleagues were worried. Um, yeah, that was such a bizarre time. I think that was when I first realized how divided this country was. You know, I think growing up, you probably have some of this too, where you grew up watching Disney movies and Hollywood rom-coms, and you know, it's just this very neoliberal picture of the US and like the American dream, and you can be whatever you want, and you
Mm-hmm.
know, you
Mm-hmm.
can be who you want to be, do what you want to do, achieve your dreams, blah blah blah. And I think that was the point where it was like, wait a second. There's a lot of American stories that I don't know about. Like
Mm-hmm.
what it's like in the movies, which is LA or New York usually,
Yes.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
is not the rest of the country. And the rest of the country feels ignored. The rest of the country feels like they've been disenfranchised, right?
Yeah.
Um, So that's when I started to learn a bit more about the different dynamics between the different states and, different pockets, like the classism that exists and just all of that. Um, Somehow we survived that insane 4 years. And then 2020, that was another,
Mm,
reckoning where at that point I started learning more about the history. History was my least favorite subject always in high
mm.
school. In school, it was just so boring the way they taught it. It's like you have to remember the dates and the battles and who won and who killed somebody. Is like, I don't care, you know. But after 2020, I started reading more about history and what really happened. Um, Reading more, making an effort to read more books first of all, and read more
Yeah,
books by Black authors, authors of color, um, and really just trying to expand my perspective
yeah,
because I realized that the mainstream media that I had been consuming my entire life was very white centric.
yep.
Um, and so, yeah, that's an ongoing process.
Yeah, same, same. Oh my goodness. And I guess her episode is not published yet, but she was explaining how she ended up leaving the United States because she was scared to be Asian in the United States. I can't
Oh,
remember where in
wow.
California she lived, but it was in California. And especially, with COVID and the anti-Asian hate that had risen, and it was just very sad, and I was just like, that really really touched me and like broke my heart, because it was like, I am so sorry that in this country you did not feel safe to be yourself, literally, because you can't change yourself from being Asian, and I was just like, I am so sorry that that was your experience. So she's thinking about moving back, but she did end up leaving because of that. And yeah, crazy, crazy times that we lived and we're still living through right now. And yeah, so you came for a job offer, you're still here. So what are you up to these days?
Well, I since have done a few interesting things. I
Okay.
ended up leaving the job after almost 5 years. I left tech and decided to finally pursue a creative thing that I've always wanted to do. I wanted to do music. I learned to produce and mix music in my own studio. I
Nice.
was trying to get my music on film and TV for a while. I did manage to do a few of those where my songs were on TV shows. And then in 2022, I started a podcast that I'm still doing today. The podcast keeps
Yes.
evolving. Right now, a lot of my time is spent doing the podcast. I still do music. Um, yeah, I'm full time creative these days. And,
Nice.
one day I might have to get a day job again, but it hasn't happened yet. So we'll see. I'm open to however life unfolds.
Well, that is awesome. I'm so glad that you were able to, get full-time creative, because, you got to go with what, fills your passion and your soul. And tell us about your podcast, the name, what it's about, and why you started it.
Yeah. It's called Nuances Are Asian Stories. Initially, I started it with a friend who's also Asian. She's Filipino, and we were both musicians. We met right during the pandemic when
Mm,
anti-Asian hate was high, and we were talking about how she's worried about her parents, and um, also she grew up in Texas, which was a very different experience from living in California, for
yeah.
example. And we were talking about our experience in the music business and how when we go to conferences, there's usually very few Asian people
Yeah.
in the music business. I mean, it's now K-pop is popular, so you see people who look like me, but before that, it was
Yeah.
not the case.
Hmm.
And even now, when it comes to American music, you don't see people who look like me. Um, Not very often, anyways. So we started sharing our experiences, and we found that there were a few common things that would happen to us at
Mm.
conferences. Like people would confuse us with other Asian people, for example.
Oh.
And then I don't know, do you get that as a Latina?
Well, people think like they don't think that I'm Latina until they hear me speaking. They just automatically assume I'm mixed with black and white.
No, no, no. I mean, they confuse you with another Latina.
With another, no, actually, no, it doesn't happen. No.
Apparently, that's a thing that happens a lot to Asians. And I was like, why? And she's like, it happens. It happened to me all the time.
Oh my
So we were
goodness.
talking about those things, and then other little things like people would ask us, "Oh, why don't you do K-pop? Why don't you do anime music?" And we're like, "Not Japanese, not Korean. So what are you saying? Because I'm Asian, I should just stick to Asian music, and I don't belong here with you playing
Mm.
English music. Like, what are you trying to say?
Yeah, yeah,
There's just all these like subconscious things that you have to navigate. So the idea initially was to humanize Asian stories because I think a lot of people, like you said, you had Asian friends, but you weren't very close to them. So you don't
hmm
know what their experiences are like. And so initially it was like, maybe we just need to have more stories out there and
yeah,
show how diverse the population is and how diverse our experiences is, but also just how relatable it is to everybody else because, we all have
yeah,
things in common. But then once the podcast started and we started recording, we realized that it wasn't for the people outside the community, really. Like, it wasn't for the white people, you know? It was for us. It was a space for
mm.
us to process our experience. A lot of the people I invited on the show, they would say, I would ask them, what has it been like for you to be growing up Asian in America? And they would be like, nobody's ever asked me that.
Yeah,
Nobody's ever asked me if it was hard or, like
yeah.
a lot of people process that for the first time on the
On the
podcast.
podcast. Yeah,
And I realized at that point that this was not for other people. It was for us as a community to create a space for healing, but also a space for self reflection. To me, that part is very important. Um, and I think for the white people or anybody outside the Asian community, those who are interested would listen
yeah,
anyway. I don't have to
yeah,
cater my content to them. I think the people who are willing to do the work will listen to it.
yes,
So I started focusing more on creating a space for more diverse stories to be heard in the community, to process, what it's been like for everybody, because everybody's experience is different. But
hmm
also, to me, it's very important for us as a community to self-reflect in terms of how are we as a community maintaining systems of oppression, right? Like as an East Asian person, I have light skin privilege. Um, my people are often pitted against the Black community, for example,
same.
right?
Yep.
How, like, we need to talk about those things. We need
hmm
to figure out how we can do better, how we can help our community do better, how we can have
Yeah.
those conversations with our parents. Um, yeah, so it's become a space for healing, but also self reflection.
The same thing happened with with my podcast with this. Like when I initially started, I was like, my target audience is non-immigrants because I want them to hear immigrant stories and have that compassion and empathy for us. And then as time went on, it was like, no, this is for us. This is for the immigrant communities because a lot of times said like I haven't had people ask me about my immigrant experience, like what I actually went through, why I came, and the whole process. So a lot of times, because there's a lot of parts, right, to our stories. And so a lot of time they're saying their immigration story for the first time on the podcast as well. So same thing. And I think we realized we started almost at the same time. It was
Yeah.
I was April 2022 and think you were March, right?
May.
May. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
same time frame, and it was like, yeah, same thing as like I started as like, oh yeah, mine is going to be targeted to white people, non-immigrants, and then it's like, no, this is for us. This is for us to share our stories, to heal, and then also realize like we have more things alike than what we are different, because it's crazy. I again, I speak with people all over, from all over the world, and a lot of the answers are very common that I get. It's like, come for a better opportunity, for a better life, and or like cultural shocks and things like that they experience. A lot of the answers are the same, but then again, like I said earlier, like depending on where they land in the United States, it can be completely different. It's like, oh my gosh, that was your experience. Could be good, could be bad. Some people have had great experience moving to the United States, and found their community right away, and felt right at home. But unfortunately, not everybody has that. So that's why I'm here to share all of this. And then I've learned so much. Again, didn't even know your country existed until now. But thank you so much. And where can people listen to your podcast?
You can go to nuancespod.com. And right now, we're doing a limited series focused on queerness in pre modern Asia. This is different from my usual interview stuff.
Yeah.
So, for this series, I wanted to go back to pre modern Asia and see what love looked like, what queerness looked like before modernization. Because a lot of the people I interviewed for my podcast were from, like, are in the queer Asian community. And the stories I heard from them were like I would never have guessed as somebody who's not queer. And one thing that happens a lot is that they feel not like they're not quite part of the queer community because the queer community is very white centric, and then they're not quite part of the Asian community as much
Mm,
because the Asian community can be very homophobic and transphobic. And so my goal with this series is to show, well, there was a time when Asia had more liberal attitudes towards sex, towards gender, towards sexuality. So digging up those stories that are being studied by academics, but unless you're an academic, you don't know about them.
yeah.
And sharing those stories from historical records, from literature, um, I think it has brought a lot of healing to people who grew up feeling very alone.
Yeah.
Um, and also, I have a queer Asian co host for every episode for this series. So that's what I'm currently on. But yeah, nuancespod.com. And it's also on any podcast platform. Just look up Nuances Are Asian Stories.
Yeah, I'll definitely include the link to the show, to your show, in the show notes and the show description. And what has been one story that has really impacted you that you've listened to, or that obviously you listen to on your podcast as the host?
Oh, that's always hard because there's so many. And
Yes.
I learned so much from interviewing people.
Oh, yes.
Um, oh, so many. The first thing that came to mind, and I think it's partly because I'm doing this series, I recently did an episode for Trans Day of Visibility with Cece Chow.
Mm,
She was one of the first guests I had on the podcast, and I brought her back
mm,
because she grew up in a Chinese Canadian family and uh, got married as a man, had kids, and then later in life realized that she was always a woman.
mm,
Came out to her spouse and kids. They were very supportive.
mm,
Um, had some trouble with the extended family. That was rough. And then she, went through transition with like hormones and surgery and all of that. And so I brought her back, and then I also interviewed her son. And it was just a really wholesome episode about how important it is for people like her to have access to the care, what a difference it made. And she talked about how so many times before she came out, before she transitioned, how so many times she didn't care if she lived or died. She just hated her body. She just didn't feel comfortable. She didn't feel home in her body. And how much that changed as she became more like in the body that she feels comfortable with. And how after the surgery, for the first time, she felt home in her own body. And then the support that she had with her, from her ex-wife and from her kids, like it was just this really wholesome trans representation that you don't see in the media, and especially not from people of color. I think that was one of my favorites.
Yeah, definitely. We can include that link to that episode in the show notes as well if anybody is interested in listening to that. Thank you for sharing that. And I wanted to go back to because you came with I can't remember the name right now, but the type of visa that you came. If you can,
H1B, yeah.
yes, if you can share just a little bit of like what that type of visa is and kind of like the process, a little bit of the process, just for educational purposes for the audience.
For sure. So actually, the first time I, when I first moved, I was on a TN visa, which is part of the NAFTA agreement. So Mexico and Canada and the US. So it's really easy to come on a TN visa because it's a temporary visa. You can't apply to become a citizen. H1B visa, you can, if you have that, you can apply for citizenship after that. So I was on a TN visa, then I applied to switch over to a H1B visa, and I believe that is there's a quota per country of birth. So it's not country of
Mm.
citizenship, but country of birth. And because I was born in Canada, it went a lot faster than if I was born in Mauritius or
Oh.
China, for example. Like people who are born in China, there's so many people in China who want to move to the US.
Mm.
It takes forever,
Mm-hmm.
so there's a quota on H1B visa, and basically H1B visa is like special skills. So they want, doctors, engineers,
Mm.
programmers,
Yeah.
just like certain technical skills that there aren't enough people in the US to fill those roles. So that was part of that program. Um, yeah, and then when I was leaving the company, I got married, and so then I switched my green card to like being marriage based from being H1B based.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. And the reason why I asked that is because again, a lot of people don't know like the different avenues and visas that are out there. So I do like to ask if people are willing to share and things like that. So what's next for either for you, for your podcast? What's next?
Um, I'm looking forward to making some more music. I have not been making as much music lately because I've been focused so much on this podcast. I've
Yeah.
done a lot of research, read a lot of papers and books. So I'm looking forward to like spending more time just making music for a
Okay.
bit. But I'm still trying to figure out going forward what I want to do with the podcast. I still want to do it for sure, and I still want to do the interview style episodes as well, but I'm
Yeah.
really enjoying doing the limited series that is partly narrative and partly discussion.
Yeah.
So half of the episode I'm writing up this narrative and about the history, and sometimes I kind of create a little scene to put you in that period. So I'm really enjoying that. I'm trying to figure out what will be my next limited series. So I'll probably do a season of regular interviews and then maybe another limited series. We'll see. I haven't decided yet.
Oh, that sounds good. Do you have music out that people can listen to?
Oh yeah, I got tons.
Yeah. So where can people listen?
So I have multiple projects going.
Ooh.
My main one is a duo with my husband. It's called 23rd Hour. So it's 23rdhr.com. And there you can find the links to Apple, Spotify, and all of that. So that one is kind of singer-songwriter. Like if you like Nora Jones, you might like what we do. It's kind of jazzy, a little chill. I also release music under Lazou. That's a bit more pop-oriented singer-songwriter. Um, and then I have collaborations with other people. I love collaborating with other musicians. So sometimes somebody will have a track and they want me to sing on it, or they want me to write a song to it. I write in both English and French. So when people need French lyrics, they'll ask me to write some. Uh, and then yeah, if you go to nuancespod.com, in the About page, I believe there is a link to my music there, so you can listen to a bunch.
Perfect. I'll include that as well. And I wanted to ask you earlier, how many languages do you speak?
3.
3. So English, French,
And Mauritian Creole.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you still practice Mauritian Creole?
Oh yeah, I
Yeah.
talk to my parents in Creole all the time. My French is getting rusty though.
Oh no. Okay.
I mean, I'm still very fluent, but sometimes it might take me a little bit of time to recall how you say something in French. Especially technical terms, because when I grew up, the internet was just starting, and like most of the stuff on the internet that I was looking at was in English, so I never really learned, what the buttons would be called in French. And then every now and then I kind of have to go and click the French version just to like remind myself how they say things in French for those things, like save or log in.
Yeah. And your parents are in Canada or Mauritius?
Mauritius.
Oh, okay. Do you visit often?
Before COVID, I did at like every 2 years or so. I haven't gone back since COVID. Um, yeah, it's far. The
Yeah, that's
shortest is 27 hours.
shortest. Wow. Yeah, from California. And then yeah. Have your parents visited the United States?
Yes, they did. They came last year. They stayed for I think a month and a half. Um, but yeah, it's a long flight.
Yeah, I bet. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much for this. This has been incredible and amazing, and I've learned so much. Do you have, I normally, well, I almost forgot. What does the American dream mean to you? I was wrapping up without even asking the typical question that I always ask my guests. What does the American dream mean to you?
um, I think it has evolved. Initially, when I came to the US, I thought the American dream was what Hollywood told us the American dream is. Like you come here and you just achieve whatever dream that is super far-fetched but somehow works out. I think the American dream's a bit more just being yourself, being free to be yourself, and yeah, like finding your own community in this big mad world that we live in. There's a lot of really bad negative things about this country, but there's also a lot of really good things. And I think as long as we surround ourselves with the good, we're going to be okay.
Yeah. I thank you for saying that because it seems like there's always extreme to everything. So it seems like there's people who are just always focused on the negative aspect of the country, and then there's people who like are always just focused on the positive side. And it's like it's both, guys. It's both and.
It depends on
There's
the day.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Like it's both and. Like this is an amazing country. We have a lot of freedoms and opportunities, but it's not the perfect country. It's not. And we can do so much better with things. But okay. Thank you so
Thank you
much
so much for having me.
for this. This was an amazing episode. I learned so much. And yeah, thank you so much. I'll include all your links in the show notes, and in the show description. And do you have any last words that you would like to leave the audience?
For me, being an immigrant, I I take it very seriously that even as an immigrant, I have a lot of privilege. And I encourage other immigrants listening to this to reflect on that and look at what privilege you do have and how you're using it, and decide for yourself if that's what you want to do going forward. I think sometimes when things are hard, we can focus a lot on what isn't going right for us, for our community. For example, I see a lot of still, stop Asian hate stuff, which true, we should stop that, but it doesn't mean we should have more police harassing the Black community. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's important for us as immigrants to remember that if we look at all the immigrants together, like we are stronger together. So we need to see the power dynamics that are at play within the different communities that make up the immigrant population and work together rather than fighting each other.
Yeah, I love that. That is so true. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too.